Great, we already have a question.
There's already a question. So I'm currently transitioning into UX writing, and I think someone mentioned before that they were doing content writing before. Okay, so like the thought process behind UX writing is really different, obviously, than content writing. And like, I guess my question is, what tips do you have as I transitioned into UX? What things to keep in mind in terms of like what to pay attention to and processes, that sort of thing?
So what kind of writing specifically do you do right now?
I'm doing like press release, like why can't I think right now? What's it called? What do I do? Press relations. Public relations. Thank you. Sorry, it's late. I'm doing public relations, so it's a lot of long form. Like it's obviously goal oriented. We're thinking about the audience, but it's not like every single word matters. And obviously UX and microcopy is a lot shorter. So
I think one of the things that really helped me was that because I was inside of Wix, I had the opportunity to have someone that was mentoring me for a period of 6 months. And what started happening in those sessions was that I like slowly got familiar with the kinds of challenges that this mentor had week to week, and kind of like the process through which he went with each of his projects. So it really helped kind of like ease me into what it would be like. I do have to say that even though I had all of this mentoring, it was still really, really challenging. I think the biggest challenge with UX writing is the amounts of different types of people that you have to talk to, and the amount of meetings that you're invited to, and just the amount of information and decks and Figma files and just all kinds of files that you kind of have to learn how to filter and organize, and you have to get really good at knowing what to pay attention to and what to pay less attention to. But in terms of the writing, I really enjoy it because I have like the creative side of my brain, but I also have like my logical side of the brain. And I think UX writing is something that really brings those two together very nicely. So in terms of like the type of content, like type of writing that I'm doing, I enjoy it better. It makes more sense to me. I find it more fun and more enjoyable.
Hi, this is a question for all of you guys, gals. About Babbel, you mentioned that there is a content management system. How do you work with it? What is it? I've never heard of it, and I'm very excited. So whatever light you can shed on it.
This too. Okay, so in the code, we use strings, and these strings are stored in Babbel. Babbel is linked to GitHub, and
Hold on, before you start, I'm gonna rain on your parade. It's a proprietary content management system that we developed in-house to
Okay.
handle our
Okay,
content.
cool.
So, sorry.
Just gonna
I know
keep
you're really
dreaming,
excited.
yeah.
There are solutions out there
Mhm.
that are packaged solutions for working with content and managing your content. This one's not for sale. I wish it was, because maybe our UI would be a little bit better. But it's good. Like, I have to say, at the end of the day, we're really lucky. Like, there are not a lot of teams out there that have what we have, this amazing tool, and Reem can tell you how it works.
okay, so in Babbel, we have projects for different Wix companies, and some companies have several projects. In NetStarX, we have one main one. So there we have all the keys, which are the strings that exist in the code. And then when we make changes to the keys on Babbel, the changes reflected in the UI without. Am I explaining it right?
I don't know. More or less.
I think I got it. I think
More
I
or
got it.
less.
So thank you. And lucky you for having it.
It's actually so good that we don't have to understand how it works. It just works.
think the really cool thing about Babbel, sorry, the really cool thing about Babbel really is that as writers, we're the ones who get to control the content. We have the last say over the content because whatever we edit there is actually going straight into the code and is being updated straight in the code. So yeah, it's a really great tool to have.
I have a question a bit more about the connection of writers and UX research and that. So I was wondering, a big part of user research is creating segments or personas or understanding who are we creating the product to, who are we writing for, who are our target audience. And I was wondering, is this something that you guys are doing? How does this come? Like, how do you do that with your work? How do you approach that? Do you even have segments or personas for different products that you guys work on? Gals?
Yeah, sure. So actually it's an interesting, you remember I spoke about Wix data. So we basically have two main segments that we focus on. The first segment is whoever is building a site, and usually this person will be kind of like setting up a site that will later be used by a content contributor who updates the site. So on one site, we're thinking of everything that has to do with like building the site, setting up the dynamic pages, making sure everything works together. And on the other side, we're thinking about people who are coming into the site and updating content. So these are two different, very distinct personas that we focus on in this specific product.
Yeah, so in Editor X, we have 3 personas. And basically, when we meet all of the team together to rethink the product or talk about the next major projects, we always have a slide with the 3 people. It's like one new designer, one experienced designer, someone working in enterprise, and we just consider them and ask ourselves, how can we create a product that can fit all of their needs?
I just want to address, I think part of your question was who comes up with these personas. And I would say that is not really part of our job. Yes, of course, we participate in doing research and understanding who our users are and talking to our users, but we are not the ones that come up with the personas, who decide which personas we want to focus on in terms of the product strategy. This is usually done by either the head of the company and the group, and that is in collaboration with, sometimes we have someone who is particularly focused on user voice or on like what market we want to focus on or our business goals. But this is something that, of course, the whole team needs to be aware of and like aligned on.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much for tonight. Everything's been super helpful. In terms of research and in terms of going back and forth, when you look at your research, let's say you said after a few weeks you see that there is some positive percentage and you're happy with your results and you post them and you change the content. Do you go back a month later, 2 weeks later, several months later and say, is it still going in the way that you want it to go, or is it not going the way? Like, do you continue to look at the same research and see if it's still going in what you want to see, pretty much?
Yeah, so we normally, when we test things, we normally test them. It really ranges. It could be from like 2 weeks to a month. I think month is the most that we'll ever test it for. And within that month, that's when we'll really focus the most on collecting all of the data. If it goes to plan and the test works really well in our favor, then we usually release it to everyone, all types of users, and we'll stop doing it as a test. We don't typically, we'll always keep an eye on it just in case, but we'll never really go back and then like, oh, how can we improve it even more? Because speaking just from the apps, all of our features, because it's such a concentrated product, all of our features have an implication on another feature that we have in the app and another thing that we're trying to achieve. So we'll, for the first... Cyclavod.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me? Nope. Okay.
Hello. Okay. um, so in that first month of testing the feature, that's when we'll keep a really close eye. And I think after a month, when we've got a solid amount of data, we're able just to kind of like release it to 100% of users. But we never really go back and, again and again and keep trying to improve, because if it's not broken, don't fix it. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to add something. I mean, something that in our specific product, something that we do a lot is something called facing. So we will, we'll divide an improvement into several stages, and we'll work first on one stage and then on the second stage. So the results of an earlier stage will always inform what happens in later stages. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, as Lauren said, if it's broken, don't fix it. But if we do kind of like detect if it's not broken, don't fix it. Sorry. We like, if there are any irregularities, such as like the spikes and support tickets that I showed earlier, or something in support, or something that doesn't look right in some kind of funnel, like it's definitely something that we'll investigate, but only in those cases, not just to go for it, like go back for it for fun.
Let's do a question from Zoom.
Wait, hold on. I want to add to that. I thought you were going to say something, Reem. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things. One, I just want to say there are certain things that the teams are monitoring all the time, right? So like we're always looking at support tickets. So like that means that when it comes to research, it's like something we always need to keep our finger on. We have KPIs that we're always monitoring, meaning like we want our product always to be working so that our users are reaching success according to the way that we think, the way that we define success for our users. And we're always monitoring that. Like if suddenly there's a drop, something's wrong, right? Either there's a bug or like, users completely change the way they're interacting with our product. And that's something that we need to be attuned to. So like, this is something that we're always monitoring. When I say it's not that our UX writers are waking up every morning with their cup of coffee and looking at the data reports. Like we work as a team. So we have data analysts that work on that. We have our product managers that are looking at things, but these are things that we are constantly monitoring. And I want to say that sometimes we pause and we take a look at our product and we rethink what we're doing. And this is why we have what we call roadmaps every quarter, and every half we think very, very clearly about where we want to take our product for the next half, and we think strategically. And sometimes in these moments, yes, we do pause and we say, wait a second, we need to take a hard look at what's going on with the way our users are interacting, with our entire ecosystem. So I know, only because I know what's been happening on Reem's team. I know that there has been like a big push on Editor X to consider all of the work that they've been doing, and to kind of think about maybe focusing on different areas. And they did a huge push on looking at support tickets and what the biggest pains are for their users, because they want to make sure that they're building a more seamless experience for their users. They feel like maybe the fact that the interface is a little bit too clunky, they want to work on usability. This is something that they really paused and said, you know what, for the next roadmap, we really need to understand our focus is going to be on ironing out these kinks and these pain points so that the interface is more fluid. Here, I'm going to hand it to you for a sec.
Okay, so in Editor X, we are always trying to keep up with the industry. So I've been in Editor X for less than a year, and I've worked on the same flows over and over and over again. So we're very fortunate because we have a dedicated customer care expert team. And so we have every week, we have user feedback and just feedback that helps us decide where to focus our efforts. And like Rachel said, we have every couple of months, we just have offsites and meet all of the team and just divide ourselves into like thinking groups and reimagine our product. And this is something that we're doing right now, just taking it to the extreme. And I think it really depends on the product. Again, EditorX really has to keep up with the industry, and there are always new things, there are always improvements, there are always things that we can do better. And that's how it is. Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. Okay, so first one is most of the requirements come with a timeline. Post research, we, content and design teams, do come up with multiple ideas on how we can create a particular feature. But because of product timelines and at times lesser bandwidth, our ideas go into the future enhancement bucket, and we end up keeping them as simple as black and white. In such scenarios, how do you convince your PMs to align to your work and pick the best possible approach?
There are only 3 words I dread: out of scope. So we deal with this often, and I think you have to pick your battles. And like I said, many times you just have to create research decks and try to make your case, and just bring as much evidence as possible. But many times you have to compromise and think about what you can do to improve the current user experience, and dream big for the future. Anyone wants to add anything?
Wait, I want to add to that. I just want to say, like, I know I'm talking a lot, but I think there's always a balance. Okay, I'm going to be honest. There's always a balance between getting things perfect and shipping a product quickly that our users need. Okay, so sometimes we know that if we get something out the door fast, it will help our users faster and more than waiting and making sure that we've crossed all our T's and dotted all of our I's, and that will take us another 2 months. We see the numbers and we're like, wow, support tickets are really high. Let's see if we can ship something out now that maybe isn't 100% perfect, but we know it's good enough. And this is, I think, speaking to let's think about the phases, okay? If we're going to be unrolling something, how can we ship out something that we know will be the most helpful in like the least amount of time? And then afterwards, we can do round 2 and add the bells and whistles. And not only that, but we'll be smarter after that, because we will see our users interacting with that initial version that has already started to help them, even though they may be complaining about it. They actually were complaining that they didn't have it before that. So now they have something, they can complain about it, and now we can fine tune it. So like, yes, of course, in a perfect world, we would all be able to have as much time as we wanted in those 24-hour time period, but we do our best to try and focus our time on what the users absolutely need.
Also, something that we started doing in my team about 6 months ago is that we actually started our own UX backlog. It's called the UX Quality Program, I think. And yes, everyone can join. And basically what it means is that there are a lot of changes, like small yet like annoying changes, like if you're a writer and there's like a label that needs to be different, or if you're a designer and you want to change, I don't know, like the alignment of a button or switch it off for like a better component. These are oftentimes not going to make it into the main roadmap tasks. So what we started doing is that both me and everyone in my UX team started to take upon those projects on our own. And so we figure out like what we need to do in order to bring these, and they really are small. Like they're very, like, think of like changing a button or changing like one line of text or something like that. But we have started like we are all always working on at least one UX quality project, and over time it helps us improve the product in ways that it would never happen if we just relied on, because in the roadmap we're really talking about like the big projects and the big features and things that are like really big and shiny. So oftentimes like the smaller projects are kind of like swept aside.
Another Zoom question. As writers, we have so much on our plates. How do you prioritize research with so much else going on, especially when some people may not see it as a critical part of your job?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think again, it's also dynamic, and it really just depends. Like if it's a really, really hectic period, I always turn to my product manager to see, like, first of all, what tasks we have and what's the hierarchy for that. And then I can kind of, knowing how I can like divide my time between writing, I can kind of know how much time I can put into research. And obviously, like, we'd all love to say we can research every single feature we do. I'm very hypocritical because I said that that's the one thing everyone should be doing, but we should be doing it. But like, obviously, realistically, we don't research every single feature, or we don't research it as much as we'd like to. Again, like, it's really hard when you have someone from above telling you we need this by, X, in X amount of days, when you want to really push back because you want to research. I think, unfortunately, when push comes to shoves, you're one part of the cog, and you're relying on other people, and other people are reliant on you. But if it's definitely, I think, a feature, like I was kind of saying about Jacob's Law, if this is like a well-known feature I know I need to write for, if it's a really big feature that really focuses on like 90% of our users, those are the ones I'd push back and really tell my PM, tell my team that I really want to research. And even if that means delaying the release by 2 days, 3 days, I always just try to, argument my case and say that it's only going to help in the long run, the more research that, not only myself, but my designer and everyone else will do. But it really just depends. It depends on your team, and it depends how much, I don't want to say influence you have, but how much your team is willing to kind of change things around the priorities that you have in your own list.
I also think that if you, as a writer, you're involved early enough and you understand enough, like the way product managers set up a project, you should be able to see the Gantt charts. And if you see the Gantt charts, this is basically where it's detailed, like what you should be working on week to week. So if you have access to that, and if you're involved early on enough, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to have time to do each of the, like, to go through each of the steps. And I will mention that you probably will never have the time to do it as deep of a research as a UX designer, because at any given point, a UX designer at Wix is working on one main project, versus UX writers who are usually working on 3 to 6 projects, I would say. So this is also something to take into consideration. You shouldn't feel bad if the UX designer ends up doing more research than you do. But if you're involved early enough, there's no reason why you shouldn't have time to do at least some research.
Yeah, I think these are great answers. And to add to that, I think a lot of it boils down to communication. And when I was a new writer and I was still a student, I had to navigate my way through the team, and I didn't always have the time to do it. So I think in the case study that I showed, like, I really try to emphasize the importance of research. And I think it also boils down to small talk between you and your PMs, and just building strong connections with your team members. And I think this is something that gets stronger with time, and with time, the team members realize the importance of research. And like Laura and Lauren said, at the end of the day, we're only so many UX writers, and you will still have to pick your battles and try to compromise.
I just want to say you guys are awesome because these are great answers. And I kind of feel that all I need to do is give it a summary. And I think I just want to say at the end of the day, our job as UX writers is to make sure we're explaining the product clearly to our users. If you cannot do that, then you need to do research. Okay, like this is what you need to do. You need to understand the product well. You need to understand how it works. You need to understand how users are interacting with it so that you can explain it to your users properly. You might have a really great grasp already of your product and of the way that your users are interacting with the product. And then maybe you don't need to add another level of research onto that. Like you get it, you're there, you can write and ship, and that's okay. You don't always need to pause and like dig into everything. But I also think that when you do feel like you need more information to make a decision, I 100% agree with Reem that it can help establish that as a part of your decision-making process, and it can make it easier moving forward when it comes to these stakeholder conversations that you will have. Why don't we write it like this, says the product manager? You know, I don't like that. Why don't we try this terminology? And when those conversations happen, it can be really uncomfortable for UX writers. But when they've established research as part of their process and they've shown that this is what informs their decision making, then it's very easy to nip those conversations in the bud with, oh, I've taken a look already at like what our competitors are doing, and I've already assessed that this is a terminology that's being used for this audience, and maybe we want to be using a terminology for our audience because it makes more sense. They also begin trusting you more, and they begin allowing you to take that time to make those decisions. So that's all what I have to say about that.
Yeah, just quick question about user interviews. Do you as writers get to lead an interview, or like you just join as you come up with questions, or you actually lead the interview?
Okay, so this is something that wasn't the standard when I joined EditorX, and with time and with help of my team lead, Nadina, hello Nadina, I explained why it's important for me to lead the sessions and why it helps my text. And again, when you build strong connections with your team, they tend to be more understanding and more receptive of your critique, let's say. And with time, it became the standard.
So mostly you join the sessions,
So,
but you don't lead
yeah,
them?
No, so for example, in some cases before in the past, I didn't join them at all. But now what we did in the last round of usability sessions that we did, we were 4 people. It was me, the UX writer, and the PM of the product, the UX designer of the product, and the UX team lead. And we just would all attend all of the sessions, and each time a different person would lead it. So we had 16 sessions and each person led 4 sessions.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
Just to kind of like a different, I think it's like so different to the apps. So we very much are like, I don't know how to translate that into English. I'm so sorry. When it comes to like, yeah. So when I joined, I was in like my then manager made sure I was in as many user interviews as possible. And they were mostly led by her or like, so team lead for content or our product manager. And then it got to a stage when we released the apps last year and a half ago, I took it on myself to lead a few of the interviews. Either it was just me by myself or it was me and my product manager or designer, because our main focus was to just first of all understand how they're using the apps, because it was a whole new concept. And as we release more features, we wanted to really understand the terminology, if they were understanding the new terminologies we were throwing at them. So I have put a pause on that for a few months because it's been so busy, but I'm looking, hopefully gonna do more of them. And yeah, I think if you can, and if, I don't think it's about trust. I think you know, if you go to your team, you go to your manager, your product manager, and just say like, I want to do user interviews. There's, in my eyes, there's no reason why they should say no, because there's no harm in it. So yeah, definitely advocate for them as much as possible. Yeah.
I have another Zoom question. It seems like Wix almost doesn't have UX researchers. Can you explain a bit why is that?
Hi. We don't have that. I think it's a decision that our management really feels is the right decision for Wix. We believe that the research needs to be done by the people that are executing as well, that it's important for our designers and our product managers and our UX writers for the team to be the ones that are in touch with our users. It's like a principle thing. Whether or not it's the right choice, I can't say. I really don't know. But it works for us. Like, I think it works for us. It's working for us for now. Maybe we'll change it one day. Yeah. Real people tuning in on Zoom.
Thank you. So when you do research, there's always bias and a lot of bias, especially if the person who does the research is the person who's actually making the decisions. So I'm kind of wondering, is there anything that you guys do about that? Maybe like workshop of how to deal with biases, or even when you generate your interviews, how do you deal with that? How do you know what would be the right decision to make according to the number of interviews that you're doing, or just how do you deal with the whole bias and the same person doing everything?
No, it's a really, really good question. I think it's a really long answer, to be honest with you. And I don't think it's always, I think it's the majority of the time, it's not in our domain as the UX writer. We have very, very clear protocols of how we're supposed to interact with users when it comes to user interviews and when it comes to usability sessions. Like, it's very, very clearly outlined, and we're supposed to follow those protocols in order to make sure that we aren't biased and we're asking the questions in the right way. We're not leading anyone. We're not leading anyone to any kind of hypothesis that we have in the back of our minds. But I would say that this is an area where we need to be checking ourselves more. And I don't think we are. I mean, I really think that Reem's case study is like case in point, you know, where she went and she was like, listen, I think we have a terminology project problem on our hands. And the team was like, well, we all use Stage internally. Why don't you just change it to Stage? That's 100% biased. So you're right. You're right. Yeah.
So in terms of bias, I think there are a lot of kinds of biases that we have. One of them that we dealt with recently is selection bias. And we realized that when we were doing usability, we were always using the Wix agency, who are Wix employees, and they have very strong opinions, and they do not reflect the average user. So this is something that we always try to be aware of, and we try to take it into mind. I can't say that we managed to 100% avoid that, but I think in recent interviews that we did, we tried to overcome that and use users that reflect the average person or average designer that we are aiming for. And in terms of usability sessions and how we make sure that our bias doesn't affect the user, we prepare scripts in advance. We make sure to not use any of the terms. We make sure to have clear instructions to avoid using any words that might affect the user in any way. And I think it works most of the time. Like, I think it makes a difference. And I think this is a great question. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Are you testing any long form content like help center articles? And if so, how?
Help center articles are not UX writing, as this is not our domain as UX writers. It's a really good question. I think everyone on the knowledge base team would say we wish we were testing knowledge base articles, but unfortunately right now we don't have the technological ability to do that, and we're working on that. I'm sure we test other long form. I'm trying to think. I know in marketing we test our marketing content. We test email content. I don't know if that this counts. I hope this answers the question. Sorry? We test preset content. Preset content. I don't know if that's that's not long form. Maybe some of it. But in general, this is not like our domain because like mostly long form content, it's not handled by UX writers.
Do you have any specific format or template in which you document your research?
We don't have, these are great questions. I think, yeah, Lauren, I think there were like some examples that you wanted to show and then we didn't end up showing them in the end, but that's why I'll hand the mic to you.
So yeah, I mean, again, speaking personally, there is no one way. It really depends. So I was going to show, we do it in Figma. So, you know, sometimes there's enough that if my designer on my team, she wants to research, she'll put screenshots from, let's say, different apps, like 10 different apps, and then create a summary box of like, these apps did X, Y, Z. This is what we should do moving forward. Other times you can like simply make a pros and cons list. Again, depending, that's probably more for like a shorter feature, but that's also like good enough. I know Ayala created a Figma or Miro a while back. She wanted to test add create button, and she wanted to see what other websites were using. So she basically, again, screenshotted all of the relevant websites, put them all in the Figma, and then basically wrote a list of all the terms that were being used and which websites were using that. So sometimes it's really just so easy. It's like basically just visualizing in front of you what is being done. But there's no right and wrong way. There's literally, again, what's easiest for you and what's easiest for your team. Yeah.
So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you everyone on Zoom. We hope to see you at our next meetup. So stay tuned. We'll be letting you know after the Jewish high holidays when that's going to be, which for those of you who don't know when the Jewish high holidays are, because we have people tuning in from all over the world. Stay tuned around mid to late October for when our next meetup is going to be. We'll be addressing I don't know what our next topic is. I think it's drafting and editing, how we go through revisions and how we handle going through different versions of our text.
And it's going to be early December.
Early December, sorry about that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.